Hello, hello. Welcome to the Worthy Writers Podcast. I'm your host, Kirsten McNeill, a Canadian self-published author and full-service editor for fellow writers. On this podcast, you'll get a look into my personal writing journey and find encouragement to enjoy your own. If you had a good time with me, I would appreciate if you could like, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. All right, Worthy Writers, let's jump in. Stephanie is a third-generation Arizona native and currently resides there with her husband and best friend. They have 3 children and have created a mini farm on a small parcel of land where they have a number of critters. She loves being a mom, riding her horses, gardening, and reading. Being in the outdoors is her favorite place as long as it's not summertime. She enjoys writing and has always had a vivid imagination. She had a dream once to write, but it was shattered by a school teacher. One day, she sat down and decided to release the stories that had roamed her mind for years. Thanks to her supporting friends, who encouraged her to share them with the world, her books have started to be published. Writing has allowed her to give a bit of her magic to the world, one story at a time. Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for joining me. How are
Thanks
you
for
doing
having
today?
me. Good.
All right, so why don't we just jump right in and have you talk a little bit about how you started your writing journey?
Well, I kind of have a funny story about that. So when I was a first grader, I had this teacher that wanted us to write, like a short story of some sort. And so here, thinking this brilliant writer that I thought I was as the little first grader, I wrote this story, made a fantastic beginning, kind of skipped over the middle, and then did an ending. And so my teacher basically told me that I kind of sucked and that I never should do that again. So it kind of shattered my dream. I never thought that I would be good until I read Twilight. Yay, right? Like everybody's read Twilight. And I'm not dissing on it or saying that it's bad in any way, shape, or form. But I realized with Twilight that it wasn't Shakespeare. It wasn't like Ernest Hemingway or anything like that had to speak this language that was like most of us can't even understand. I was like, you know what? This is simple. This is easy. And I could do this. If she could do this, I could do this. And that was kind of my inspiration was Twilight. Well, that's funny. But after that, I just kind of sat down one day and just wrote the little story that was in my head and voila. Today actually marks my 1-year anniversary. So yeah,
Yay!
I know, right?
And you were in first grade when your teacher basically told you sucked.
Yeah, she was kind of brutal. Like so I remember I have these, it must have just been because she was so bad, but we had this spelling test and I remember her walking around and one of the words was as. And so when she said it, she was like, as. And so my little first grader brain was like, okay, I need extra S's in here. So I spelled it ASS. And I got sent to the principal for being a naughty little first grader. And here I was innocent because I was just trying to spell as, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, she just wasn't very nice. She probably shouldn't have been teaching first graders, maybe high schoolers. I don't know. But yeah. So
yeah, that doesn't seem like something that you would want to tell a 7-year-old or.
I know, right? Like you need to be like, oh, you did such a good job and like uplifting things. And she was just kind of grumpy. Her name was Miss Gristle. So perfect and fitting, right?
Yeah. When did you get inspired by the reading Twilight and then starting your first novel?
Well, and it was actually quite a long time before it because Twilight came out, gosh, what, like 20 some years-ish ago.
Oh gosh.
Right? It's been a while. I don't know. I could be wrong on that, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
But Twilight actually got me back into reading again because I had this kind of lull where it wasn't really reading or whatever. And I actually had a little bit of a mental breakdown and I just needed somewhere to like bury my thoughts and bury myself into something. And so I just sat down on my computer and started writing. And I thought, if Stephanie Myers can do it, Stephanie Whitfield can do it, right? Stephanie Whitfield can do it. So yeah, so that's where, and let's see, I started hitting like maybe 4 years ago, or gosh, no, maybe it was like 6 years ago. Yeah, wow, time flies. And then, there's that whole fear that you have to conquer, that you don't want other people to read it because maybe it's not good enough. And I gave it to a couple friends and let them read it, and they were like, "Oh, this is really good." I'm like, "Really?" And so mostly I geared it towards tweens and teens, and that's been the most exciting to see how excited they get after they read it. They get all giggly and giddy, and so that makes it worth it. I know some adults, it's YA, so it's geared toward younger people. So I've had a couple adults like, I'm like, well, it's not your thing. It's not your thing, right?
Yeah, that's the thing too, is if you know your target audience and if your target audience is happy, then that's important, right?
Correct. Like not everybody likes horror, right? So yeah, not that that's my genre, but.
Have you written a lot of stories outside of the Hidden series? Because I know that's your main one right now. Or were there points where you just kind of did some one-offs or just short stories or just things for yourself? Or what kind of things did you go through with that?
So after I wrote most all of Hidden, and then I actually wrote the second part of Marked, and then I actually hit a huge writer's block. I know some people say that doesn't exist, but it totally existed for me. And I think it got to a point where I knew something in Marked needed to change, even though I didn't want it to. And so it just kind of was flattening out and getting kind of boring in a way. And so I left it and let it sit. And then I started high fantasy, which was really fun. I think you've read some of it, which was probably horrible because it's super rough. I started writing, like 40,000 maybe I got. And then I finally got the idea to finish Marked and went back to that. And then I've got a couple little side stories for Hidden that I've been working on. It takes a while to get all that process going. And yeah, so not too much before Hidden, only because I had, kind of had my dream shattered by that first grade teacher. And then, so I didn't think I was worthy, really.
So what do you usually do when you have writer's block or you're kind of struggling through a scene or trying to get into the zone?
I've only had it happen majorly that one time. I've had a couple times. I think the best thing is to actually just sit down and let your characters tell their story. And so I know a lot of times you're thinking, oh my gosh, like, I don't know how this is going to go. I feel like my brain is just, got this block, right? And so, or maybe get up and go outside, take a walk, or watch a TV show just to get those brain waves moving again. I think a lot of it is that we get so focused and then our brain has a little bit of a burnout maybe. And so I think we just need to refresh that. For me, it was actually a meme. Well, I'm not going to tell you the meme because it might sort of ruin my story, Marked for whoever reads it, but it was a meme that I saw and I was like, oh, brilliant. But yeah, I think we just sometimes need a refresher. And I think one of the most important things too is when you feel that burnout, let your body have a break. And I think that's your mind's way of telling, like, I need a small vacation or whatever it is, like take a week off from writing. I think then you can refresh and start over. So at least that's in my experience. I know after I published Found, which was 3 books in 8 months, I took 3 months off and didn't write anything because I needed that.
Yeah, I think that's really important to remember, is to give yourself permission to not have to write every day, take a break, refresh, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to recharge basically, right? Yeah, totally.
So where do you get a lot of your inspiration from?
That's a good question. I don't know. And sometimes I feel like, oh, this, story just popped into my head. It's my very own, but I don't think so. I think it's a mixture of maybe shows that you've watched, present or past, or books that you've read, and then they just kind of burst into these other little strings of ideas where you can kind of, because at this point, really, most ideas have been taken. They just need to be onto different tangents or different stories or whatever. I did have someone commission me to write a historical fiction, which I need to work on, and I haven't done it. It was 3 years ago when he asked me, and it's a great story. That one, I'm like, oh, there's so much research that has to be done since it's sort of real and the timeline is real. And so then part of me was feeling stressed that I didn't want to get something wrong. So I haven't started that.
So your genres are typically contemporary and you don't really do too much research with what you've done?
Most of my fantasy, well, I do. So there's certain things I did actually a lot of herb research with Hidden. And that was a lot of fun because I really enjoy gardening. And so researching like different herbs and things like that, that was fun. But a lot of it is just like hidden was basically me in a nutshell at 16, all my experiences as a high schooler and some boys and things like that. And then I just gave her a little bit of magic, which made it fun. But a lot of it is from my own personal experience and what I've experienced. And then if I did need to research, like I know the authors always joke about researching ways to die and hoping that the FBI didn't come after them or something. And so I have done those sorts of researching, and Google becomes your friend. It's so much easier not have to pick up an encyclopedia and, so yeah.
If you could go back and talk to your 7-year-old self, what's something you would want her to know?
Oh, for sure. Right. That's a great question. I would probably tell myself to go back and rewrite that story, add a little to the ending, and then give it back to that teacher and be like, here, try this. And just to have a little more confidence, because especially I think at that age, though, it's hard because we see adults as like people we look up to, especially teachers, right? And so it would, I know that's hard at that age, but I'd love to tell myself to go back and take more creative writing classes, because with having that where she kind of squashed my dreams, I didn't feel I was good enough, so I didn't take them. I took more in college. I took more science classes and math classes, which I loved. I think if that hadn't happened, that instance, I probably would have gone more towards the creative writing and things like that, which would have changed everything, right? So it's crazy how one event can change a whole course, basically, the whole course in your life, really.
If you could go back in time, you just have to bring all your books with you and say see, teacher, look at what I created.
Right? You were wrong. I don't even remember what the story was. I wish I would have kept it, because it would have been kind of cute to look back at it. But I think I probably crumbled it and threw it in the trash because, it wasn't good enough. I'm sure it entailed something with horses would be my guess.
So you've always loved horses and that lifestyle and everything?
Always. I crawled around on my hands and knees and acted like a horse. And I played with those. I don't know if you've seen those Breyer models. They're like a hard plastic. I had hundreds of those.
Yeah.
So every Christmas, every birthday, that's all I wanted. I had so one of our houses we moved into, we had shelves that were personally made for my horses, and they just lined one after another. So yeah, that's definitely obsession of mine for sure.
That's awesome. Do you think you would ever write a story that doesn't include a horse?
I don't know. Well, I actually have one in the makes, and it probably won't. It's just all up here. And I've threw the idea at my husband, and it's basically about a seer or a fortune teller kind of guy that would go back into the past and change things for a certain amount of money. But then there's the consequence of changing the past timeline that changes the future timeline, which, things like that have been done, but that'd be fun. But I don't think there would be any horses in that one, which.
Interesting.
Yeah, kind of sad, but it is what it is. Horses aren't in everything.
It's just funny with writing fantasy. It'd be so easy for you to include horses and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in the historical fiction, because it takes place in the 1800s, where horses were the main transportation. So I was like, oh shoot, I can do this. Got horses, right? We're good.
What is one piece of advice that you think all writers should know, no matter what level of experience they're at?
If you're going independent publisher, I would say jump on Instagram and get into the writer community, because they are amazing, supportive, and you get to see all of their journeys. And then you realize that you're not alone. And I think when you first start out, that is the hardest part. No one to help you. There's no one you can talk to. And there's all this, everything is just overwhelming with the marketing and the publishing. And, now you've got to find editors and proofreaders and ARC readers. And so then you feel oh my gosh, there's no one I can really talk to, because it always seems like all your neighbors and your current friends, none of them are authors. So none of them do that. And so I think jump onto that writer community and make friends with all these authors and writers, because you realize that they've done exactly the same thing, and they are always willing to help and reach out. And I think that right there is a huge confidence booster, and at least helps you feel like you're not alone, for sure.
Yeah, Instagram's really great for that, I find.
Or right? It's super great. I think next, or if they don't want to get on social media, which I totally understand, would be to just write and just get it down. And then I think one of the things like I read in Stephen King's on the writing craft or whatever it is, which was fabulous. He says something like, don't let anybody read it until it's all done. And I'm like, you know what? That's a fabulous idea, because really, like, there was times in mine where I would send it out and it'd only be halfway, or just because I wanted people to see how much I loved it and I wanted them to see, feel the same. But I think he's right in the fact that you just need to get it down and then get the feedback later, rather than getting it in between, so that it doesn't mess up your thoughts or your ideas or whatever it may have been. So that would probably be another one too, is just get it down before you share it, right?
In that book, he also says how much he hates writing workshops, just because when you're sharing the piece, it's so rough. It's such an initial draft that it's just getting feedback for it is pretty harsh sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Get it down, get it fixed, and then get it out there, which I'm guilty. I have done it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're coming to an end here. So is there any final words you want to say?
Well, first, thanks for listening, and happy writing, worthy writers.
Thank you for joining me as we got to know Stephanie. Learn more about her through the links in the show notes, and make sure to subscribe to the Worthy Writers Club to access exclusive content from both of us. Join me next time where I chat with another friend and self-editing coach, Elzevira Elbada Yelgersma. Thank you for listening to the Worthy Writers Podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Share your love and support by checking out my Buy Me a Coffee profile for bonus content and to help me continue building my creative empire. If you'd like other ways to connect, follow me on Instagram, join my Facebook group, or explore my website to learn more about me, be part of my community, or suggest topics for future episodes. All links are in the show notes. I can't wait to connect with you. My final words before you go: never forget that you are worthy.